What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Remember that I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and the Dr. Vibe Show is the place for epic conversations. I'm also a certified empowerment coach and president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. We are jacked tonight again, continuously. We have I keep on saying this is a true friend. This is a true friend that is on the Dr. Vibe Show tonight. If anyone's been following the Dr. Vibe Show for a little bit of time, you know him. But if you don't know him, it's Dr. Marvin Thompson. He's an educational leader who has spent the majority of his 25 years. Well, it's probably more than 25 years, but he looks like he's 25 years old.
25 is fine with me, man.
All right. In the educational field, turning around schools in challenged communities. The scope of his experiences in schools range from preschool director, elementary teacher, and to district superintendent. I could go on for a while, but I'm going to get to some other little highlights. He's a humble guy, but I got to give him props. He's done many television and radio appearances, including CBS Morning News, The Tavis Smiley Show, LA Today, and CNN Headline News. He also was a speaker back in 2013 at the Steve Harvey Mentoring Camp for Boys and the Indiana Black Expo. In 2015, he was invited to speak as a guest of the White House at the 2015 Congressional Black Caucus Convention in Washington, D.C. to discuss the challenges facing boys in challenged communities. Right now, his energies are still focused, but still going deep. He's president and CEO of Empower Ed, an educational consulting firm specializing in organizational systems development. He's worked with schools across America, from rural districts to some of the largest and most challenged, as the Los Angeles Unified School District. He has done stuff even in Africa, so he is all over the place in a good way. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation like we always do about an important subject, the future of education under the Trump presidency. And if you've noticed, nothing has really been discussed much about this, except about the nomination of Betsy DeVos, who unfortunately has, from what I've read, doesn't have much educational experience. But we're going to get into that. But let's welcome Dr. T. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, my friend. I'm glad to be here. Good to see you again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure and an honor to write back at you. And just want to shout out, if anyone has any questions, please just type them in or comments, and we'll respond to them as quickly and as much in real time. I'd like to say a shout out to Dr. Anita Jack Davies from Kingston, Ontario. She is waiting for the doctor to drop some mad knowledge, she's saying. So we're looking forward to it. So,
well, hello.
Yeah, so Dr. T, Let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. During the last election campaign for president, how much was education discussed, in your opinion?
Well, it probably not much at all. The last time we probably heard a real strong argument and conversation about education probably goes back to George Bush, and I'm talking Herbert Walker. Right? And little Bush comes along and he picks it up with No Child Left Behind. But this conversation was begun probably leading us where we are under Herbert Walker Bush's term as president. And it's a good way to start. It's a very good question to ask, because I think if you look at Betsy DeVos and where she is in her confirmation today as a watershed moment in education, you will lose what's actually been transpiring in education in America over the last 25 or 30 years, particularly in the last 20. So she comes in at a time where she is literally picking up and I would say putting the capstone on an agenda that was set a long time ago. And that capstone's name is privatization. You know, that is the ultimate goal. And this is what she's pushing. And only with someone who has that limit of knowledge, with a huge Republican Congress who is going to railroad her confirmation in, as Senator Lamar Alexander did a masterful job of cutting off his colleagues, limiting their questioning in round number one. And then today, I don't know if you saw it, but it was the most contentious confirmation hearing, trying to confirm the voting and watching Senator Alexander really manipulate the Roberts Rules of Orders to his benefits and to those who were DeVos' supporters. So, that in itself is an autopsy, but her confirmation signals a huge threat to America overall. That's the part that is the most alarming.
Well, and it's interesting because I was listening to some reports on NPR radio saying how contentious that hearing was today, and it was something that rarely happens. And it seems that there's a lot of challenges to be faced by the education system. You mentioned privatization. Why has privatization become such a popular consensus or contention in the United States education system?
Well, that's a good question, too. Everybody likes to look for one answer. I think that's the one thing about education, Dr. Vibe, that always makes these types of discussions difficult. There's several things about education. One, everybody went to school. So when the issue comes up, they tend to respond on their experiences, but that doesn't mean that it's a correct assertion, right? That's the difference between a layperson and a professional. That's number one. But number two, once we get into it, we always constantly look for the singular solution to whatever the problem is. And education is very complicated and there's no one answer to it. But I'll answer privatization this way, because there are layers to this, which if you're someone who's seeking it, you need to triangulate all of the factors to go, this is a good idea. Number one, the trend that we've seen over 50 years of failing schools has been the justification for change. It has fostered new industries. It has formulated new ideas. People have, I can't tell you the number of industries that continue to prop themselves up on the failures of public education. So there's one reason that's one thing that privatizers throw out as a rationale. The second reason is cost. We're spending a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer dollars, and we're not reaping the benefits. We can do it for cheaper. Cheap is always good. And one of the ways that that's been fed and been received is a lot of large cities, Philadelphia, New Orleans. If it weren't for Katrina, New Orleans is a kind of an outlier, because without Katrina, I don't know if we would be looking at the largest charter system here. But it is a way to get school districts to start looking at ways to balance their books. And if they can hand over, a problem to a private entity, get it off my hands. Number two, I don't have to budget for it. Hey, it's all yours. You take my problem off my hands. So there's two good reasons to do that. So, and that is those are the two primary ways and reasons that privatizers and charters and vouchers get into cities. And, how the stage is set, Dr. Vibe, usually it's done financially. I always say that you can always tell when this pattern is getting ready to happen, when in your community you start reading in the paper about program cuts, budget deficits, and not teacher shortages, but teacher overages. And we have rising costs of insurance and healthcare costs. You will hear them tout those things, which are everywhere. Every industry has them. But for some reason, when it comes to education, it becomes a huge problem. So that's one of the major ways that privatization gets in. That's one part of it from the aspect of the public sector. But when you look at the privatizer, those who are in the industry, those charter operators, the fundamental reason that they're there is to make money. And if anybody thinks any different, they're sadly mistaken. Even hospitals make money. But there's a return on that investment. In education, in this private sector, there is no return because they perform equally. There's no evidence anywhere, that charter schools overall or the voucher system or any alternatives in this choice model that DeVos will put forward has any significant greater outcomes than our public schools. None whatsoever.
So when looking at President Trump and looking at candidate Trump, what has he said about education? Because I haven't heard anything much. What has he said about education, and how's he going to solve or help resolve the education crisis in America?
Well, you nailed that. He didn't say anything. Candidate Trump, and I fail to have to call him president, but I guess I have to. President Trump.
You can call the same. You can call him whatever you want. It's up to you.
I won't call him whatever I want.
No, okay, respectfully.
I'll be respectful. Our leader, in this new role, from candidate to sitting president, he is exactly who he said he was. For those who are paying any attention, and even for those who weren't, people are seeing him for who he is. I don't think there's anyone who was for him that isn't saying he's exactly who he said he was. And then there are those who were against him and non-supportive who were saying the same thing. So I think he's been consistent in sharing that. As far as education, he was very clear about his intentions to expand the voucher program. He did not specifically spend a lot of time on charters, but neither did President Obama. President Obama got involved in education primarily because No Child Left Behind was up for reauthorization. Had that not been the case under his watch, had that not been the case, I doubt very seriously if he would have made a huge push to have anything revitalized in that initiative. And frankly, there was nothing significantly different that came out of it. A lot of rhetoric, a lot of jargon, but in essence, in terms of how it changes the landscape of education, absolutely nothing. And some of his initiatives early on, Race to the Top, taking federal monies and opening the door for charter expansion, that was part of his legacy in contributing to, again, this pathway to DeVos. So none of this is new, for those of us who are in the industry.
Okay, so let me roll back a bit, because I know that myself and Dr. Anita Jack Davies, we're in Canada. So can you explain to us, and we have Candy, who's from Japan, so we have a truly international viewership right now. What is No Child Left Behind? What is that all about? I've heard it a lot, but can you give a definition of it for our audience?
Yeah, sure. No Child Left Behind was a law that was enacted in 2001 under President George Bush. And basically, what it did was put metrics and measures to how well students perform. And those metrics were tied to testing and how well students performed in tests. And I think you heard the question put to Ms. DeVos, whether growth or proficiency was the most valued method of evaluating whether or not students were performing. That was the essence of that question. But what most people aren't aware of is No Child Left Behind was not new. 1965 here in the United States, President Lyndon Johnson authorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, which essentially put standards of quality to the operations and functions of schools. Keep in mind that public education in this country was an afterthought. It wasn't something enacted by the government. It was more of an opportunity seen by the government. So education was not this big thing taken by the United States and says, we're going to do this for our masses and our population to create better citizenry and strengthen our workforce. It actually started in small towns, by locales and communities. And you will hear Betsy DeVos, and I think in both of her hearings, she kept referring to states' rights and communities. She's trying to take us back to that old model and under this Privatization Act, under the guise of neighborhood and community schools and states' rights, but it's sold to the benefit of private charter operators. But No Child Left Behind essentially changed the accountability standard for education in the United States. It moved it from a compliance tone, are you following the guidelines, to how well are you performing with those guidelines. And the metric to that question didn't line up with the actual question. So this is why we have disarray. And this is the disconnect under the disguise of reform in education in America, because we never align the reform with the question that's asked and the events that are taking place. And this is how we got to where we are.
And it's sort of concerning that there's an election campaign and education was not discussed at all.
Yeah, that's Dr. Vibe. This is my answer to that question. There's nothing to talk about when the deal's already done. There's nothing new to be added. There's nothing new that any politician can say about education that, one, hasn't been said, and two, the door hasn't been closed on. So when you look at the trend in our country, the biggest issue is the achievement gap. As many of us know about the wealth gap that exists in our country here, that wealth gap is also compounded by that achievement gap, which has not closed. As a matter of fact, it's widened. And it comes at a time where our country needs this generation of young people in a greater time than we've ever needed them, as we are an aging population. You know, as I shared with you before we came on, as of January 1st of this year in this country, 10,000 Americans turn 65 every single day, and will do so for the next 19 years. These are our baby boomers who have come of age, right? So that same group, for a portion of this group, they're having fewer number of kids. So in our demographics here in the United States, our largest school-age population, 5 years and under, are students of color, many of whom live in poverty, many of whom are isolated in terms of quality education. These are the young people that we're going to be relying on as our future workforce. And the quality standards needed to close that achievement gap, meet them where they are and take them to where we need them to be, have not been proven to be met by charter schools who are unregulated, have no accountability standards, and very little oversight. So you can continue to fail as a charter school, continue to receive public dollars, and at the same time make a profit. So there's less accountability in so many areas. But that's why you haven't heard much about education, Dr. Vibe. It's been towards this path for so long.
You know what? I just want to interrupt you respectfully. This is very interesting. Candy from Japan has a lot of interesting comments saying that everyone has the right to an education. She also says in India there's a high rate of children who are not in school, but they are doing something about it. But she said in Japan it's a total opposite, where education is seemed to be taken more seriously, and they don't seem to have the issues that we have in North America, not just Canada, but North America. Obviously, we're focusing on the American model here. Let me ask, in regards to conversation here, that how does or how doesn't privatizing education help with the situation, or doesn't help with the situation you just shared with us?
Well, if I can, I'm going to address Candy in Japan. She's absolutely right. And studies have shown that students in Japan perform better. Their curriculum is way more rigorous earlier on than ours. Our kids kind of coast through K through 12 in terms of rigor and get to college and bust their butt and consider that the rigorous part of their academic journey. And the reverse is true for people coming from her country. They have their college experience probably by the time they're in ninth grade. And so by the time they get to college here, what we sweat and cram for, they coast through. So that's the responder to her question. She's absolutely right. And that's how that translates here in the United States. But back to your question again, Dr. Vibe, if you can repeat it.
Well, you've mentioned how the demographics of the education system, the children, especially under 5.
Mm-hmm.
How is privatization, or the proposed privatization of the education system, going to affect that group, in your opinion?
Well, I'm going to do one thing first. I say privatization because no matter whether Betsy DeVos or Donald Trump call it vouchers or choice, this is nothing more than, and you'll hear the term neighborhood schools. It is nothing more. Neighborhood schools is resegregating us. That's what that is, because that's where we live. We live in segregated neighborhoods in this country, and that's going to be more difficult to maintain. Privatization of schools and vouchers and sending them to even religious-based schools. The biggest difference is the quality of service. You hear this term accountability all the time in these conversations. So let me give you one of the examples. As a charter operator, when I get money, my public dollars, I allocate my money to my staff, I allocate my money to operations, and then I have an allocation of resources that I give to students in terms of their needs, whatever resources, books, materials, all of those things. The difference between a charter operator or a private operator and a public entity is that public entity has oversight in the form of a state-regulated government. You have a superintendent and you have a school board that oversees those expenditures. The state puts very specific and strict guidelines on how those funds are used. So in a public school, a special needs student is allocated, I'm just going to use this as an average figure, $10,000 for every special needs student who goes into that school. Those monies are to be spent on that student. In a private setting, that $10,000 is allocated to the charter operator to dispense and disperse and use at their discretion. So if I decide that I'd rather have band uniforms as opposed to a particular piece of equipment or deploy a particular strategy that I know might benefit a special needs student, I have the discretion to make that decision. I can say, we'll do that next year. In a public setting, those monies must travel with that child. So there's one level of accountability that public schools have that this administration will be asking parents and the public as a whole to give up.
That's a big ask.
It's a huge ask, and we have laws in place, and I think this goes back to Ms. DeVos's first hearing when she was asked about special needs. And Senator Tim Kane addressed her multiple times about the use of, and he kept referring to IDA. IDA is special education funding. How shouldn't all schools be accountable for how they use those funds? And Betsy DeVos refused to answer that question at least 5 times.
Wow.
She refused. And she refused in such a way that even Senator Kane, I don't want to do an autopsy on this, but even he went, okay, is she refusing? So he just asked her, are you refusing to answer me? And she, again, did not answer that question. So the very example that I just gave you is but one threat of privatization for our schools that can harm a large population of young people all over this country.
I'll parking lot about Ms. DeVos in just a second. We have another, and don't feel folks feel free if you have general questions about education. We're certainly going to focus on the future of education under the Trump administration. But there is a question here from Black Mariner saying, what's the best method or strategy for African-American parents who wish to educate their kids? And obviously we can tie this in with the upcoming or the present administration for the next few years. So certainly if you want to give your thoughts on that.
That's a good question. And I say to him, know the policies in your district. We African Americans or any parents of color can no longer rely on the words of the administration or the district. You need to know what the policies are, and you need to hold the districts accountable to them. When you need to know what your school board is doing and what they're planning, you need to see exactly what their long-term strategic plan is, and you need to hold them accountable to it. In this, there's also in the Black community, while we're on that topic, there has been a huge increase in this privatization movement of the number of Black families that are homeschooling their children. Now, I don't know if that's a trend that is going to continue, but that is also one of these emerging industries. Someone has to service these young people. Some people has to certify the programs that offer it to them, and there has been a proliferation of programs for this emerging population of homeschoolers, and we are seeing that trend grow phenomenally in Black communities. And as I had on my show, Dr. Vibe, and to your listeners, I had on my show one of the directors from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and as we were discussing this issue of the demographic change in our society in the context of the school to prison pipeline, and this goes back to your listener's question, she said, it's going to be more important now for everyone in this country to have an eye on colonialism, because there's an undercurrent in all of these themes around driving privatization towards leadership and governance by a few. And that few is going to have a negative impact on that minority population, which is the largest, fastest growing population in this country. So I think the listener who asked that question about what the Black community should focus on, definitely know policies and start having discussions in your school districts about quality. Start talking about quality. Betsy DeVos knows nothing about quality. Donald Trump knows nothing about quality. And from today's vote, 12 senators know absolutely nothing about quality. Charter schools know nothing about quality. I'm in New Orleans, the largest charter school system in the United States, and I can tell you, they don't know jack about quality. They know how to open schools, they know how to count heads, and they know how to count dollars. And that's what this movement's all about.
Well, Black Mariner says, this man is incredible, with exclamation point. So there you go.
Well, thank you. Well, listen, my friend, you can reach out to me through Dr. Vibe. This is not going to go away, but there is a way to call people out who are going to be driving this machine, and you have to call them out on what they should be doing. All of that's out there for them to know. They haven't been focused on it.
Okay. I'm going to bring Betsy DeVos back out of the parking lot here. And I have to ask, how did she get nominated or selected to be in charge of education where she has not been in a classroom? For those who don't know about Ms. DeVos's family, she's is the daughter-in-law of billionaire and Amway co-founder Richard DeVos. So when you hear the name DeVos, it's Amway, and also Richard DeVos actually owns the Orlando Magic also. But it fascinates me that someone is nominated to that responsible position and has no experience, like someone who's a finance person who's never made any money. How did that happen, and why was that person, in your opinion, why was she selected by Donald Trump?
Well, I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to work backwards. Your direct question. If you take a look at Donald Trump's selections for his cabinet, they all fit the same profile of a Betsy DeVos. She's no different. You have billionaires, people who have ties with Russia, those who have been who are from Wall Street, who work from some of the biggest corporations on Wall Street. So she's no different. She falls into that category. She fits the profile. So there's really no surprise. I would have been surprised if Donald Trump had gone after a qualified, highly educated, informed educator. I would have been blown away, because every one of his selections in terms of his cabinet and those who are close to him are people who have things and are at a level that he values. And there's an old adage about the law of the lid. No leader, no leader is going to hire someone above them. They're usually going to find people who are like them and that they can grow so that they can move. So it's not hard to look for people around Donald Trump who are just like him, who value those things. So it's no surprise a billionaire is running one of the probably most intrinsically motivated departments in the country that really oversees our kids. And as a reminder of how serious this is, Dr. Vibe, I don't know if your listeners are aware of this. Back in 1983, and this is kind of preceded why Herbert Walker Bush began this movement in education. 1983, Congress produced a report entitled A Nation at Risk. That report evaluated, after 1965 Secondary and Elementary Education Act, evaluated education from 1965 to that moment. And they said, quote, if another country had imposed an educational system like this on us, we would have considered it an act of war. That's how detrimental a poor educational system can be to a nation. So much so that they embarked on it. Now, whether or not it was true or whether or not that was a red herring to get us to where we are, we'll never know. But things were never good. The second part of your question is, how did Betsy DeVos get here? I think educators as professionals in this country have to take responsibility. Years ago, when No Child Left Behind came out, I actually sat with one of the authors of that legislation in a Ruby Tuesday's restaurant in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and debated him about it for 3 hours. And my initial pushback to him was, you're asking something that is tangible. I think you may have chosen the wrong metric, but most importantly, it did not show value to the educator themselves. And what I mean by that is this. For the last 50 years, educators in this country, particularly unions and all of those organizations, have a fixed focus on proprietary rights, rights of ownership and comfort, and I wouldn't call it comfort, but safety, job protectionism, abuses in the workplace. That has been the primary, and negotiating quality, negotiating how we go about it. And some of it has been positive, some of it has been productive, some of it is necessary. But it has overtaken the focus on developing the teacher and the profession as a profession. And if I can give you an analogy and tie it to Betsy DeVos, to take that last statement and bring it home to 2017 and today, this moment right now, if the Chief Surgeon General of the United States were nominated, who had no experience as a doctor, but worked in hospitals as an orderly, ordering or maybe just ordering supplies in a hospital, but someone nominated him as a Surgeon General, but he didn't like patients. He didn't like hospitals. How far do you think that person would go? It wouldn't be citizens who would just be the ones screaming. It would be the doctors who would be screaming because they would have felt disrespected, that their profession would have been brought to such a low standard. The only way that could happen is if those doctors have been so marginalized, so demeaned for so long, so distracted, so overwhelmed, that they only knew one thing. They have been conditioned to watch and talk. And once that person was appointed, this is what I would say to teachers and real educators, not the ones who just go to job for the paycheck. We got those out there. We have those out there. But Betsy DeVos doesn't come by accident. So yes, Trump chose her, but that landscape was laid a long time ago. And I do think Betsy DeVos may offer one of the best opportunities for the profession to regain its teeth.
What do you mean by regaining its teeth?
Well, when No Child Left Behind was written, no teacher or educator sat at the table. There wasn't a large contingency of educators that sat there. And ever since then, there hasn't been this huge engagement in terms of having educators give us what they think, right? The Department of Education, albeit is the leader in education, is also a heavily compliant organization. It's all about following rules, crossing every T, dotting every I. Educators lost their teeth when those laws are passed, and they continue to be passed. And even before No Child Left Behind, every new reform, we jump on every bandwagon. We don't evaluate like physicians do. We don't look at it and say, this isn't working. Those ideas become educationese. They become terminology that we use that has no meaning. You'll hear things like accountability. When Betsy DeVos can sit on national television in front of senators and being asked repeatedly about accountability, specific examples of the application of accountability, and felt comfortable saying, I believe in accountability, that tells you how far education has gone off the tracks. That is even allowed to happen, that a word meant to raise the level of professionalism in this industry can be used to dismiss it. And nobody batted an eye. That's how far. That's how many teeth education's lost. That's how many. We literally don't know how to fight back. Do not use real words. We use terms that we all agree on that really lose its meaning and application. And we just look for the next new word. That's how gurus come about.
So if privatization continues to go forward, how far off the track is it going to take the system? And let me just ask, and yeah, I'm going to leave it there. There's another question for you, but I want you to address that conversation piece first. Like, how much further off the track then do you feel privatization of the education system, public education system, is going to make that?
Well, I think those of us out here who know have to help the public understand what needs to happen. I think that's this moment, Dr. Vibe, signals a new conversation that needed to happen. You know, this is the opportunity that education needed. This type of failure, this type of threat, to me, as a long-time educator, and on behalf of every other educator out here, and I've talked to hundreds over the last couple of weeks since her hearing, we're not out here just sitting and watching, but I think this is, and I've heard it for the last 3 days, what can we do? What can we do? And what we need to do is win. We have to win. The only way they can close your schools and privatize schools is to shut them down. We have to be more budget conscious. We have to be more conscious about evaluating what we're doing and determining whether or not it's having a real impact. And that's not a superficial check. This has to be a deep inquiry and being willing to throw things out the window. Because in education, frankly, in this country, we do a lot of unnecessary things. We do a lot of things that have been added on from 10, 15 years ago. And if you ask people, why are you doing that? They will tell you, well, my last principal told us, or, 15 years ago, and you're still doing it. That's kind of like being, bringing a patient in who has a mutilated leg and a physician taking out a saw and immediately wanting to amputate it. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't a civil war. We have new techniques and new strategies. And in a lot of ways, education operates like it's still in the Civil War.
Excellent. All right, before I'm going to get to Dr. Jack Davies' question, and also I want to say a big hello to Tachi. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any questions or comments on what your thoughts about the education future under the Trump administration, please type them in, and certainly Dr. Thompson will give his take. I'm also flattered because we have 3 educators in the conversation right now. We have Dr. Thompson, who deals with the public schools.
The more the better.
Yeah, Dr. Thompson, who deals with the public education system in New Orleans, Louisiana. I have Tachi, who deals with the education system in Florida. And then we have Dr. Anita Jack Davies, who's in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. So we have 3 educators, 2 countries, and then we have other people who are watching. Thank you all for stopping by. Let me now get to Anita Davies' question. She says, can Dr. Thompson speak about the lack of diversity amongst the teaching corps and what can be done about it, especially with the administration that's in now?
That's a good question, and I'm probably going to share something with you here in the United States that's probably not going to please you. Currently, as I said before, our school-age population is now majority minority overall. Across some states are overall majority minority school systems. But our teacher workforce here in the United States is 78 to 80% white. And when I say the sad part, because we want to see more diversity in our teaching workforce, that's not going to change over the next 25 or 30 years. When we look at our black teaching corps, we make up about 7 to 8% of the overall teaching corps. And then you have the Latino population roughly, about the same. Whatever the difference is with 78%, they're pretty split. That's not going to change, primarily because not only do we have that number, but we have fewer minorities going into teaching.
Okay, why do you feel that's so? And
well,
also,
those are the facts.
Okay,
that's the trend.
Okay, that's one thing. Do you think that the current administration will make any effort to change that? And I know what your answer is going to be, but I want you to say it.
Well, the outgoing Secretary of Education, John King, had already begun that initiative. Now, he had only been in a short time, and it was something that Arne Duncan actually had even broached during his tenure. John King picked up the mantle, and he began to push it forward. So there is, even at the federal level, and even at the state level, I'm here in New Orleans where we had, in this charter movement, an overwhelmingly white population. That's a whole nother story. But it didn't have to be that way. There were a lot of minority teachers pushed out of the system and not rehired and replaced with an overwhelmingly white teaching staff. Now, 10 years after, and they're moving in a different way, they're now trying to recruit more minority teachers. I think that trend might continue because in this privatization movement, there are partnerships. Privatization is not solely the charter. It's kind of like when you buy an Xbox. You can't play that game without the controller. You got to buy the controller. You got to buy the game. You got to buy the headset. When you get a charter school, you've got to have a way to supply your teaching corps. Where are they going to come from? Teach for America has been a huge support system to the burgeoning charter movement. So there is an industry within industries to support this movement. It cannot grow without those support systems. You can't keep selling Xboxes if you don't have enough controllers. We'll move on to PS2s. They'll move on to the one that has it. So this movement has all of the moving parts to it. But there are also some choices. So we can't put all the blame on the privatization movement on its own. Education salaries have not increased with inflation. It's one of the slowest growing incomes and salaries that you want to find in the public sector, because you're now using public dollars to give teachers raises. So that's always a challenge.
Okay, the questions are beginning to fire fast and furious. So here's the next conversation piece. Tachi is asking, what are your thoughts about how the HBCUs will fare under the Trump administration?
Wow, that is a question for the ages. With diversity in our school, we have seen a whole lot more light shed on HBCUs and their value here in the country. One of the things that concerns me about DeVos is her lack of knowledge about public schools in any capacity. She knows nothing about higher ed. She does not even, I don't believe, understand that part of her role. And we see, when we all think of Secretary of Ed, we seem to think about that role in the K through 12 arena. But it is a huge massive undertaking. And she does, in fact, have oversight over colleges and, yes, HBCUs. With growing diversity in our country, there's going to be a competition. And I don't know how that's going to play out. And it's a very good question, because that competition with increased diversity, that need to go to an HBCU for the reasons that some may have gone to may be diminished, because there will be greater diversity on other campuses. So there's already been, and I was just talking to a good colleague of mine, Dr. Walter Farrell, retired policy analyst from the University of North Carolina, on this very subject just the other day. And when I broached when I gave the answer I just gave to your listener, he said to me, that's already happening, that we're already seeing fewer students, Black students, enroll in HBCUs because of the growing diversity on some of the larger mainstream campuses. So this may be the opportunity for some ways. I don't know how this is done, and I may be totally off base, but for HBCUs to broaden its range around educating a larger, wider mass of people. Doesn't have to change what they do, but I think maybe as some of our other larger universities are going to be, and already are, being forced to embrace, not saying forced, to survive. Your population does not look like it used to in this country. So you're going to have a larger minority population. Our larger universities have embraced it. It may be where some of our other universities are going to do that. And there are some already who are starting to look exactly like the demographic change that's taking place. So there is some transference within our HBCUs.
They are still, more questions are coming, Dr. T. So
Sure.
Knuckle up and buckle up. We got another good one here.
No problem.
Dr. Jack Davies has another question asking, do you think that the Trump administration will increase the presence of the police in schools?
Ooh. Wow. Doctor, that is an excellent question. And, you know, I've been so focused on, I hadn't even thought about that with any significance. I don't know if there will be an increase. I'm a little concerned that we may see an increase in the number of police involved incidents. So I don't know because in order to take, he offered, President Trump suggested $20 billion to go towards this voucher initiative. Those monies have to come from somewhere, and I imagine some of those funds that are allocated, there will not be enough left to expand the school resource officer program in some of the schools. So for me, my initial response to that is, I'm a little concerned in this climate under this administration, we may see more officer-related incidents. And maybe even to this listener's question, we may even see a new industry pop up in terms of private security systems or companies that become contracted by school districts. And that's already begun to happen in some of the southwest parts of the United States. And that hasn't been good.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. That may create a whole new industry. That may be a whole new industry that's coming up there. Let me ask also here she has another question. Why do you feel there's so few Black professors at HBCUs? I don't know if that is the case. You would maybe know better.
I do not know. I've never looked at the numbers of staffing, and I wouldn't even dare take a guess at it. I have no clue. It's a good question. Is that the case?
I'm not sure. I have no idea. I have no idea on that.
I have no clue.
Okay. No problem. So we've caught you up with all the questions. You got a good workout. We got a few more minutes with Dr. Thompson. So if anyone else have any questions or comments, no problem. Please get them in before he has to leave us near the top of the hour. Dr. T, you don't sound optimistic.
Well, I'm always optimistic. I think I'm still annoyed. I think I'm still annoyed. I spent 3 hours watching that this morning, And then I spent another 3 hours dissecting it, and I walked away from it. And I think for me, I'm still in disbelief that that level of incompetence was not only presented, but railroaded. And it wasn't Betsy DeVos. As my dad used to say to me, never blame a man for getting the job. Not their fault they got it. Not their fault they got it. They don't make the decision to hire themselves. So prior to this happening, sure, I wasn't pleased with Betsy DeVos, but now that it's happened, I did my autopsy on it today. And I think what you're hearing from me is, Dr. Vibe, I'm just still going, I think we have fallen further in education than I presumed. And I'm really mad about that. Because we're talking about young people's lives and their futures, and they're not up for sale.
So do you feel that the fall or the decline, it's not a political thing, because from what it sound like, it just seems a lot of people just giving up and don't care anymore. They're only caring about themselves. Is it a societal thing? Is it it's not political, because it seems both sides have been sort of waning on it. And it just seems that there's people have given up and just let what be and just get what you can.
Well, in defense of teachers, I talked about us getting our teeth back. They had their teeth pulled from them. They didn't throw their hands up and just walk away. I can say that. Teachers didn't say, oh, well. They fought. They pushed back. And as I use the analogy with doctors, when you get marginalized so much, and you get pushed back, and you get overwhelmed, and there's a new initiative every week. There's like what's the flavor of the month this week? This month. At some point, it is just battle fatigue. And then you have to pick your battles. And along the way, the profession gets chipped at. It got chipped away so much that Betsy DeVos came in with her little pinky finger and pushed it over, and was able to push it over. Because we have battle fatigue. And I think this should signal a call for people to say, pick up your armor, let's line up, and let's push this thing backwards. And this does not mean get rid of charter schools. This does not mean that the voucher system is bad. But the voucher system and the charter system and this choice system has significant flaws. More flaws than successes, more questions than answers, more problems than solutions. But yet we keep pushing forward. We've been doing this in reform in the United States since Plessy versus Ferguson, since Brown versus the Board of Education. Ever since we integrated our schools, there's always been a call for reform. One constant remains: the achievement gap. Between these two hands lie 50 school reform efforts, significant ones. And the gap has not closed. It's widening. And Betsy DeVos coming in, my arms can't stretch that far. And it dooms this country to an undereducated future workforce when we have an aging population that needs them to produce at higher levels to support them in Social Security and Medicaid. This group of people, this large mass of aging people in this country, the baby boomers, which carried us forward, are now going to be relying on a smaller number of people to take care of them. And in this country, by 2027, we will become a majority minority workforce. And that's going to continue for the decades after that. So these same people who are looking to marginalize these young people under this administration have actually set the stage for minimizing their benefits in the future. That's the part that puzzles me.
Okay. Tachi and Jack Davies are working. While you were sharing that, they got two more good conversation pieces for you. So first up, Tachi is asking, what do you think will happen to funding for, and I don't know if you cover this or it's part of your reach, faculty research, especially which is considered, quote, unnecessary, unquote, or controversial, unquote.
Wow. Who is the question from?
That's Tachi. Tachi. Yeah,
Tachi.
Tachi.
It was an excellent question. And I don't know, Tachi, if you saw Mr. Trump's edict to the EPA about climate warming, global warming. And basically, I don't want to see any more research come out of here, right? So no more peer-reviewed anything. So the scary part in answering your question is, I don't know if Ms. DeVos will go after that right away. I think what you may see is research that moves into a less factual, less validated, less reviewed arena. I think the criteria for what constitutes quality research, what constitutes a quality initiative, a best practice, so to speak, a proven strategy, which is the language under the new law here in the United States. I have a feeling what you may see is a use of those funds to water down the quality of what you and I and most of these listeners would quantify as quality research.
And Dr. Jack Davies, they were like tag teaming back and forth, back and forth. She asks, do you feel that black-only schools would remedy the education situation that the Trump administration will deal with?
Who asked the question?
Dr. Anita Jack Davies.
Dr. Anita Jack Davies, you deserve a gold star. Dr. Vibe, give her 3. Her question is literally it's an underlying theme in black communities. As I talked about the white teacher workforce, there are studies that have come out of Johns Hopkins University and Stanford University, as well as Harvard, that purport the increase in student achievement. Basically, black students do better with black teachers. As a matter of fact, there was a study out that said all students do better with a black teacher. And one of the primary reasons wasn't their race. And race is probably sometimes overstated and given as an easy answer for everything, but culture. The culture that the race has been assigned to and what it produces. So and one of the findings in that study was black teachers go further in their explanation. They give broader examples to students and their problem solving. Dr. Nicholas Papageorge out of Johns Hopkins University did a study, teacher racial bias in education. And I had him on my show early this year. Maybe it was actually a year ago this February, 2 days after he released his report. I was his first interview. This report literally identified the difference in white teacher expectations versus black teachers' expectations towards black students. The difference was significantly higher. And as simple as questions as, how far do you think this child will go? Do you think this child will graduate high school? How do you think this child will do on this? What's their potential? Overwhelmingly, white teachers had lower expectations of black students, particularly black males, as did black teachers. That finding has been replicated since February at least 3 times, all with the same findings. So I think the question, and I think Dr. Davies, this is why your question is so powerful. We have been looking at the achievement gap in education in the United States through a numerical value and a quantitative method. It has its merits. But as we grow more diverse in our student population and stay more homogeneous in our teacher population, I think we are moving to understanding what is a huge component that attributes to this achievement gap. and maybe, and mark my words, I have a feeling it may be redefined. I don't know under Betsy DeVos will it be or not, but I think real educators will work and to understand that that gap is the new accountability in education. That may be, as I said, ever since we integrated our schools, the two constants we've had, a wide achievement gap and tons of reform. But not one of those reform movements has ever declared teacher expectations, the equitable distribution and how that plays out, and an examination of that as any standard of accountability in our school systems. And we're starting to see that in a host of ways, and research is backing it up.
We're coming to the top of the hour. I'm going to get one more conversation piece out before I want to let you go. You're talking about integration of schools. In your opinion, has school integration been a good thing? And because we're looking at possibly privatization, is that going to cause, I guess, what's non-integrated schools coming up more and more?
Well, let's take a look at where these private schools are. They're not growing up. They're not popping up in the suburbs. You're not seeing them pop up in the suburbs. You're seeing them pop up in the inner city schools. You're seeing them pop up where there's poverty. So this is not going to affect the masses. I guess the question of integration and whether it was good or not, I guess that's an individual decision on the collective. I think there's no other way we would have gotten to know each other. Maybe we would have. And maybe the problems that we're having now would have been masked. I mean, that in itself is probably a debate to be had for a whole nother time. But integration, I think, in some ways, in this moment, has borne out those high expectations and shared expectation. It's an implied outcome in integration, that we're looking for equity in all areas for all people. And when that doesn't happen, we move to seek improvements to ensure that we close the gap on those things. So I guess as it relates to this dialogue and this context, Dr. Vibe, I would say it was a good thing because there was nothing. This is why Brown versus the board and Plessy versus Ferguson even came to the forefront, because that separate and unequal did not guarantee equity. And equality had a different, the term back then was equality. Well, we're now pursuing equity, and equity is a much finer degree of right and wrong than equality.
Well, on that note, unless anyone has any more conversation pieces, we're going to start winding it up. Dr. Anita Jack Davies says, I would love to appear on Dr. Thompson's show to chat some more. So definitely I can certainly give you each other's contact information offline. Dr. Thompson, before we let you go, three. Thanks again for taking your time as always.
Man. And when you call, I'm there, brother.
Well, yeah, that especially over the last 2 days, especially.
Yes, sir.
Any final comments in regards to what you feel Trump administration is going to deal with in regards to education? Any suggestions, especially for not only African Americans, but maybe Black Canadians too, when it comes, or but people in general? Not just, I don't think it's a racial thing, because this affects more than just particular races. This is a whole American thing. And then your contact information. So go ahead.
Sure. Let's move away, if I can, to answer that question, because I think if we stay focused, you know me, Dr. Vibe, it's the adage that my dad used to share with my brothers and I all the time. Small minds talk about people, average minds about events, great minds about ideas. So I want to move away from DeVos. I even want to move away from charter and vouchers, because that's an event. That's going to take place whether we like it or not. And I think, Dr. Vibe, to your question, let's get it down to what we can control. And this is, I'm going to answer the way you ask it. For Black parents, one of the biggest barriers to our young people being successful is vocabulary. Vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. And let me break this down for you and tell you why. It starts very early on. A middle class and upper middle class child regardless of their race, walks into a school in kindergarten with a 10,000 word vocabulary. A child in poverty walks in with anywhere from 2 to 4,000. So when you get to first grade and second grade, as you build from vocabulary to sentences to reading, that child who has 10,000 words, who came in with 10,000 word vocabulary, has a great head start. It wasn't his money that gave him a head start. It was how he spoke, what he heard. Was he asked to speak in full sentences? Was he exposed to a variety of words? Was he exposed to a variety of readings? And I will say this to you, that doesn't stop at kindergarten. It doesn't stop at elementary school. One of the most frustrating things for me when I first got into high school is to talk to a 10th grader who's talking to me. I used to teach 5th grade. And I'm talking to a 10th grader who sounds like a 3rd grader. And when I realized the power of vocabulary is when I held them to a higher standard. Our ability to learn and our cognitive capacities, they always continue. This is why we keep talking about lifelong learners. But they're greatest from the time of birth up until we're like 23 or 24 years old. So the need to push our young people beyond the mundane conversations, because that conversation, that vocabulary is rooted into every engagement they have in school. The tests they take, how they're assessed verbally, orally, all of those things are valuable. And that is also how they expose themselves to new meanings in context. It is one of the key reasons our young people fail at testing. It's not the sole reason, but the way the tests are written, designed by people who do not look like them, being asked to use words do not come from their environment. So we already know about the racial bias that's inherent in testing. That racial bias is manifest in vocabulary. That is one of the most important things. I could give you a list of 5, but Lord, please walk away with that one. Please walk away with that one.
Excellent. Great things to close off with. Can you give contact information for yourself where people can reach you?
Sure. You can reach me by email at Dr. T. Wait a minute, I got to remember my own email. Dr. T.
Dr. T educates at gmail.com.
I never email myself. Dr. T at drteducates.com. You can find me on Facebook at Dr. T Educates, and on Twitter at, this is really easy, at Dr. T Educates. And on Monday nights, if you go to my Facebook page, I host a podcast dealing with all things school, families, and communities. And the show's called In the Bullpen with Dr. T.
And it is an excellent conversation piece. I've been blessed to come on it once in a while when he lets me, and it is something you should.
Oh, come on, man! You're too busy and too big to be on my show. Come on, man.
It's not true. You called me yesterday.
Give me a break.
Hold on a second. You called me yesterday for some help, right?
Yes, sir. I did.
All right. You just
and you delivered. Delivered.
Thank you. I received that. So thank you so much, Dr. T, for taking time from your positive, productive schedule. Everyone who joined tonight, the conversation, Dr. Jack Davies, Tachi, Dr. Doc Davies from Canada, Tachi from Florida, Candy from Japan, Dale from Toronto, Black Mariner, I don't know where you were in from, and also there's an AAMT24 just said the best. So that's very nice. Thank you for those words. If you want to if you want to touch base with myself, probably the 3 best ways are website www.thedrvibeshow.com. Twitter is at drvibeshow. There's also email at dr@thedrvibeshow.com. You can catch my conversations all over the place. The Goodman Project, WJMS Radio. You can catch things at Stitcher Radio. You can catch on YouTube, iTunes. What else we got going on these days? We got iHeartRadio. We've also got Tuned In Radio, and we got Google Play Music. I got them all done finally for once. So
there you go.
There you go. So upcoming conversations on the Dr. Vibe Show. These two are audio, live audio. So all you'll need to do is follow me or go to my website and you'll find out. Tomorrow night, I have a gentleman, Corey Haywood. He's going to talk about one of two articles he's just written. One of them is When Black Women Date White Men, It's Love. When Black Men Date White Women, It's Betrayal. Or he's going to talk about 10 unorthodox steps to preserve Black love for men or women. We're going to chat about one of those two. And
That's interesting.
And he'll come back on the other one for another conversation. And then on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, just like the one tomorrow night, we have, what's the gentleman's name? I'll give it to you right quick. Just bear with me a second, folks. Thank you. The gentleman's name is Elwood Watson. He is an educator in the United States, a tenured professor, man of color, who wrote a great article in the Huffington Post recently about Emmett Till. So both those conversations will be available via live audio via the Dr. Vibe Show site. If you'd like to find out more about what goes on the program, send me an email. I will add you to the mailing list. Most of the time I will send emails out to my mailing list people so they don't have to go to Twitter or Facebook or anything else. It gets delivered personally to their mailbox like I did with Dr. Thompson's appearance today. And if you have 2 minutes, I'm going to provide a link in the side right quick here. If you want, click on this link and you can take a quick little survey about tonight's show or tonight's conversation. I'd appreciate it if you take your time. Oh, and one other thing, AAMT24 says, you too rock. Black Mariner says yes. And Black Mariner, I would suggest you may want to follow or get in contact with Dr. Thompson. Your daughter is 4. And he does have a lot of experience in regards to equipping your daughter to be successful under the current educational climate. Going to let everyone, absolutely.
Please do.
Yes, he's here to serve folks, so please get in contact with him. If you don't get in contact with him, get in contact with me, and I'll be able to give you his contact information. As always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution. Actually, here, Black Mariner says, these are jewels. I'm taking notes. You can get more notes by contacting him directly. As always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless. Peace to well. Keep the faith. And remember, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Thanks again for everyone tonight. God bless. Goodbye.